so glad to be here with Professor Rao. Incredible credentials. I can't even begin to give you a sense of how much Professor Rao has accomplished in his career. And so glad to have you here, Professor. So thank you for taking the time to be with us. Look, we're going to talk about a little different topic today, right? One is, we want Professor Rao to give us a sense of what's really going on in the broader economy, which means that the impact of AI, impact of technology on the global economic and global economic leadership. That's something which we want to deal with it a little bit. And then we will also get into technology leadership itself. And then talk a little bit more on what can we do as a group, and with some specificity to GCCs, specificity to the broader industry that we're all working today, right? So let's start probably with AI leadership, which is a topic which Professor is very familiar with, something which he's worked on for a while. There's been a significant momentum, Professor, right, around AI, and then this morning we talked a lot about AI, and then we had a futurist who told us that AGI is going to be in 2 years from now, and then you might have a different view, I might have a different view. Srikanth here, I keep picking on Srikanth because he has a different view. I may or may not agree. But, what should be our key focus in this time and day with everything happening around, from AI to generative AI to agentic AI, and eventually maybe at some point in time AGI. So your thoughts on how you see this and where you see this AI leadership. Do we really have a leadership? What's India's? There's lots of stuff I've asked you already, but give us a sense of what you think of all of this, Professor.
I think, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's very nice to be with all of you. I'm currently with the BITS Pilani system, joined about 2 years ago, but I spent 25 years in the IIT system, IIT Bombay and IIT Delhi, 7 years as the director of IIT Delhi. So, I have a very broad understanding of the Indian education system. I also wrote, recently about the DeepSeek movement for India. When the Chinese DeepSeek thing came up, many discussions were on why didn't India not create one? Why did Chinese have that and India did not have? I think, I published articles on that, and the biggest difference is our investments in science and technology. I think we are at least a decade behind what China is doing. We are spending about 0.65% of GDP on R&D, right? Whereas China is over 2%, much larger economy, much larger percentage of GDP. So in fact, I often give this example that what China spends on 2 universities, you can check it on the web, Tsinghua University and Peking University, 2 universities, it is our entire Ministry of Education budget, right? So that is a difference in scale when it comes to funding, in China and funding in India. I think that done over 2 decades in China, obviously, they have reached a stage where not just DeepSeek, but you will see many more moments like that. I think India now has to play that catch-up game. And even the ISRO, for example, we had that Chandrayaan moment and the moon landing and all of that. But that's also almost, 5 decades of investments in space, right? I think that is one area where we have been consistently investing, and now we are seeing the fruits of that. And for India to catch up on the AI space, I think, it will take time. And AI probably, in fact, I recently saw some report, we are the biggest consumers of AI, I think, which is a good thing. And developing any foundational models and all of that, I think, in academia there are efforts, but more on customizing whatever is available for Indian needs. I think that is the focus right now, even in academia. And even the GCCs are also not spending enough money. I recently saw a report that the 5% of the global R&D spend happens in India through the GCCs. I think there's not much to talk about when it comes to even GCC spending on R&D. And the industry spending on R&D is only 0.2% of GDP. whereas countries, US, China, all of them are above 2%, even when it comes to industry spending of R&D.
But Professor, sorry to interrupt you. I will tell you, you mentioned the Chandrayaan example, fantastic example. We didn't spend nearly as much in the space research as the rest of the world did. We still did what we did. So why wouldn't you repeat the same thing in AI? Why should the spending be any different in the space sector as opposed to AI?
That's a very good point. Now, if you look at ISRO, right, America landed a human on moon like 4 decades ago, right? We are thinking of landing an object on the moon. So we are that way a few decades behind what US is, right? I think that difference in spending also translates to the difference in our achievements. I mean, we tend to celebrate every achievement as a great achievement. And, the ISRO, that way is an excellent model, right? So the consistent spending over a period of time, and the human capital costs are very low in India. Whatever you do in India, right, you will anyway be 5x cheaper compared to whatever you do in those countries. So I think the cost advantage wise, India will always have that advantage. Whatever you do in India, you turn out to be cheaper, right? But in terms of capabilities of what ISRO can do and what US can do, right? I think there is a vast difference, and even the SpaceX and the privatization that has happened in the US, I think India has a long way to go on some of those fronts too.
So, just picking on that point one more time, you mentioned that we are about 0.65 or 0.7% of the GDP overall. It includes a whole lot of, you clarified, you actually educated me saying that that's also the money spent on, DRDO, ISRO and all of that.
Half of that money goes for DRDO and ISRO.
Yeah. So, yes, the rest of the world spends 2% or higher on the R&D. So there is a role with the government plays, there's a role with the industry plays, academia plays, all of that. Now, I want to argue innovation culture is a mindset rather than just based on investments. What are your thoughts on, how can we sort of course we need to increase the investment, but is it also a mindset issue that we have?
I think it's a good point. India, at least if you look at the academia, right, I think we have been stuck with this publish or perish kind of a culture. And anything in academia today, awards to recognitions to promotions to everything depends on the number of publications and the quality of publications. That's the only parameter that is used to decide on everything. So therefore, all institutions are in a race to publish papers, and that's what has happened. Now for the past almost like, I would say 7-8 years, India has also woken up to the fact that we need to file patents, right? And that has also become another race now. So India now is ranked 6th in the world when it comes to patent filings. And so therefore, now what has happened in academia is not just publish or perish. The other P that has got added is patent, publish, and prosper, right? That's what we are all looking at now. So you patent, then you publish, and then you do startups. Now all academic startups, in all our institutions, there will at least be 100 startups now, even through faculty startups or student startups in all of those kind of domains. So it's now patent, publish, and prosper. So I'm at least happy that startups have evolved as a medium right now for us to translate our work. I have 2 startups. Many airports in India use the explosive detector we developed at IIT Bombay. NanoSniff is the company which actually is able to commercialize the technology and sell that. But it has taken a long time. But our biggest challenge is what takes 5 years in the US to do is what takes us almost twice that amount of time, half the money or 1/4 of the money, but twice the time, because the manufacturing facilities are hardly present when it comes to this deep tech kind of product innovation. You make a few prototypes, those facilities are now available, but doing anything at scale, there are no facilities in the country. And you need to create facilities. For that, you need to raise money. And raising money for deep tech ventures, is a big challenge in India today. Government has multiple schemes, but the money is pretty small. And even where there are funds available from government, the bureaucratic hurdles are so many that by the time you get money, it will be more than a year, right? So therefore, you can't really, even if when government says, I have money available, there is lot of skepticism when it comes to getting that money and actually being able to spend it, because all government money comes with so many restrictions attached to how you can spend it. So I think though we are beginning to allocate more and more resources for innovation, right, the deep tech startups and all of that, but we haven't been able to, make the rules simpler.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the bureaucrats still function the way they were functioning 20 years ago. So the rules remain the same.
So,
I
so
think some
Professor
of
Rao,
these
I
are-
want to, I know that's a problem, but I think the same way you talked about the academia and the ability for the academia to get the funding and it's not happening the way it should be, same thing you're finding in the technology area. Deep tech you mentioned, we announce these big numbers and they never get trickled down to the startups. It's such a big inertia in by the time. So there is a lot of willingness on the top. You allocate in the budget saying that we're going to be 10,000 crores on this fund, 10,000 crores on some other fund, but that startups still don't get it. So in your mind, I'm not asking you to solve the problem. What is that the government should do differently to make sure that we at least, because everybody is talking about this problem. I've talked about this problem, you talk about this problem, everybody in the audience, they talk about this problem. What can we do?
I think, they have realized this problem, frankly. The National Research Foundation, the Anusandhan National Research Foundation is a step in that direction. For the first time in any government ministry, ANRF, right? Basically, you can call it NRF. In NRF, there is no financial person sitting, meaning it's the only ministry or only government department today where there is no financial advisor. If you go to DST, right, DST secretary you think is all powerful, but next to DST secretary there is a financial secretary who reports to finance ministry, doesn't report to DST secretary. And this person, has all the powers in the DST, the Department of Science and Technology, when it comes to, release of money. The secretary can approve any projects, but the financial advisor, FA as they call it, has all the powers to stop the funding, because he doesn't even report to, he or she doesn't even report to the secretary. That is how all government departments operate. ANRF is the only department where there is no financial advisor. And they have appointed, now if you look at the recent appointment of ANRF CEO from GCC community, right? He served Intel, he served GE, he was professor in the US. You could not have asked for anybody better than that. And we are all in touch with him. I think we need to see now, the government now has that intention to make it easier when it comes to the funding academic institutions or even industries. And I think, that's an experiment which we need to watch out for. And if it succeeds, I think that's a good beginning. But otherwise, the problem is with that bureaucratic kind of hurdles, and also the academia industry collaborations. I think the inability of industry to collaborate with academia or academia to collaborate with industry, depending on where you stand, where you sit, that's where you can have your own views. But I think our inability to collaborate with each other is also the biggest reason why the knowledge has not been getting translated into wealth.
So, Professor Rao, it is never the intention. It's always the implementation or the execution which suffers. And I just briefly mentioned this to you. We have this theory that anything, whether it is R&D, whether it is skilling, whether it is ensuring that the universities produce the right kind of talent for the industry, we look at a triangle, if you may, or a tripartite partnership. At one end, we have the government. At the other end, we have the industry. Then the third, we have the academia. Now, for these three elements or these three institutions to really collaborate, I've always found it's never the intention, right? Always wanted to do. But someone is not ready at any given point in time. Either the government is ready, industry is dragging its feet, or the academia is dragging its feet. How do you make sure that, you've been certainly in the academia, and then depending on where we sit, I'm in the industry box, let's put it this way. And then why aren't we able to get this working right?
I think, things are slightly getting better, but I don't think the trust, there is a huge trust deficit between government and industry. I think, they don't seem to trust each other. Maybe academia can act as a glue. I think with academia coming in between, maybe government can work more easily with industry. But until now, right, the biggest challenge with government systems is government money going to a private industry was a big challenge. Any secretary to sign on a file where government money would go to a private entity, would be a huge challenge in any government system. Correct. But they don't mind giving that money to an academic institution, right? And I think there are two kinds of problems basically. One is the orientational problems, the other is transactional problems. The timelines between what industry wants things to happen at the scale, at the pace, and how government can operate can be vastly different, right? If I have a collaboration where I get some funding from a GCC, I get some funding from a government, the time lag between them can be a year, right? Now, if I am an academic institute, I have got that money from industry, right, to do that project, but the major chunk which needs to come from government is delayed for whatever reason it is, and then, it becomes a big challenge for me to execute that project. Again, those kind of bureaucratic hurdles that exist today. And also, most of our public funded institutions, now I am with a private university where we don't have those challenges. Any money that comes to a public funded institution becomes, like government money, right? The moment you give money to an IIT, IIT will have to follow the same rules as government funding, because we are a government institute kind of a thing.
Correct.
And that also, hampers the progress, because industry wants everything to happen at a much faster timeline. If I have to buy an equipment, if I have given you money, why don't you go and order that, right? But in a government process today, right, it takes me 11 months to order an equipment, from 11 months to import an equipment. That is because for any equipment from 5 lakh rupees to 200 crore equipment, right, I need to seek permission of secretary in the Ministry of Education, to place an order, right? I mean, why would Ministry of Education needs to approve for me to import an equipment? Because of whatever rules that they have made right now to curb the imports and all of that. So I think that is a kind of a process delay. And that's also the reason why not many programs where the co-funding models exist, government gives you some money, industry gives you some money, academia executes the project, haven't really taken off, right? That's one big challenge that exists right now. But ANRF is also, are trying to address that. I treat the government money separately from industry money, right? And so that's one major structural change that we need to make in academic institutions now, particularly in the public funded institutions. Yeah. And I think these are some of the challenges that exist, and very often, the IP sharing kind of processes. Yeah. If government has funded, industry has funded, if an IP gets developed in academia, who owns it, right? Any public funded institution to exclusively sign an IP agreement with an industry, right, where the government is a investor, is a big problem, right? If I do any exclusive agreement with any industry, where the government funding is involved, there will be all kinds of questions raised. So that is another major issue that we have right now in the government system. So a lot of these rules need to be eased, and academia wants these rules to change, industry wants these rules to change, even government wants it. But the problem in government is execution at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day,
it's all trickling down. I think there is willingness at the top. By the time it comes to the middle order or lower order, you have a problem. But I want to be hopeful, Professor Rao. I think you see every 2 or 3 years, the ease of doing business needle has moved. It hasn't moved fast enough. We still have a lot of issues, but I think we're moving in some sense, right? So I'm very, very hopeful. I know we can talk about this for the rest of the day, but I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something which you are very interested in, which is research integrity. And the research integrity, because of the kind of a data integrity which was going into it, was not being the best. And then you had a view saying that it's happening because of fear of failure. Now, I know most of the people in the audience might have read your piece on what your thoughts are on research integrity, but tell us a little bit more about what you think of research integrity.
Yeah, I think it's becoming a concern. Today, India ranks 3rd in the world when it comes to publications, right? And but we are not spending enough money. In fact, India per dollar spent, Indians write more papers than anybody else, including China. That's one parameter where India beats China head and shoulders. So the per dollar spent, if you want to write papers, you come to an Indian or hire an Indian. So that's how it works. But though we are ranked third in the world for research today, even for retractions, right? We are also ranked third in the world, and which is a matter of concern.
Isn't it par for the course? You're number 3 in the research, number 3 in retraction. What's the problem?
I think retractions is a problem. Whether you are number 1, number 2, number 3, retractions is
I'm
a
just
problem.
I'm just being
I know,
naughty
I know,
here,
I
you know.
know.
So okay,
But
keep
the,
going.
but the percentage of retractions in India is also growing exponentially. And some of it also has to do with the rankings race. You know, for a very long time, the researchers used to compete with each other in terms of how many papers have they published, right? Because all our, assessments and the awards, rewards, everything would depend on that. Now institutions have begun to compete with each other in terms of which institution has written more papers. There are institutions in this country which have shown 500% improvement in research papers, which is not possible. To get to those kind of numbers, the investments also need to be proportionate to that. And without spending money, because there is not enough money in the system, to be able to show that 500% improvement in the research output, you are basically, cheating, right? You are, either plagiarism is a problem or fake data is a problem, right? And so one publishes papers either by plagiarizing data or producing fake data, and eventually it gets caught, and then you retract the paper. That is how retractions happen. So I think, another problem that also happens is a rankings race, right? Now, India is struggling with this rankings thing. The government of India ranks institutions based on the data institutions submit, right? Now, when institutions submit, all kinds of data, because now they're all looking at higher rankings, because these are all government of India rankings. No, I don't think any country in the world, the governments rank their institutions. They rate their institutions. Even in UK and all of that, you have Russell Group, you have some groups and all of that, but you don't say that this institution is number 1, this institution is number 2. I often keep telling people that government ranking institutions is a zero-sum game. For somebody to go up, somebody has to come down. As a nation, you haven't gained anything, right? So I think it really doesn't serve any purpose. But I remember, in one of the IIT council meetings, a minister was very unhappy with an IIT for its ranking to go down, because its ranking that year has gone down. And he was praising another IIT, which has improved the ranking. I said, as a minister, you basically have lost out, it's a zero-sum game, right? Somebody has come down, somebody has gone up, right? This is the biggest challenge we have. Now, if government starts ranking institutions, you have to participate in that. You cannot even say that I don't want to participate. And people are submitting all kinds of data which you cannot even verify. And based on that, you give these ranks now. And the retractions are not discounted in the rankings, right? If I've written a paper saying that I have solved the let's say some particular TB problem, right? That paper might receive 10,000 citations in the next 2 years, but third year it has got retracted. But then my count, this citation counts for that paper will go towards ranking, and my institution might actually get much higher rank. So I think not able to account for such simple kind of things in a government ranking is a problem. And today fortunately somebody has gone to court, right? And there is a court stay now on government rankings. I hope they will realize and they will improve upon it. I have written about it. I have written letters to ministers. But at the end of the day, the governments do rankings. Who are doing these rankings? Some bureaucrat sitting somewhere, who has a 2-year tenure. And I think, that whole ownership is not there when it comes to doing anything properly. I think these are the challenges that we have right now in the country, and that's also the reason why research integrity is becoming a major concern right now, because institutions are, in this rat race to improve their rankings, because government of India is ranking these institutions. And
No, you made the point. I think
race, at the end of the day, everybody is a rat, right?
Of course. Now, last question for you. I know we're going to run out of time. No, this is the GCC summit. I'm not going to say conference, Mamta. So GCC summit. Now, we had a lot of discussion around how GCC are pivoting, from a labor arbitrage to skills to everything else, all the way to innovation, R&D. You've done a lot of thinking and work around R&D and what it means. How do institutions get into the R&D bandwagon and all of that? Now, given the nature of GCCs, which you understand really well, what are your suggestions for the GCCs to pivot more and more value-adding innovation, value-adding problem-solving R&D, so that they are very relevant to the broader organization and the parent organization they belong to?
No, that's a good point. In fact, I recently read a report. There are about 10% of GCCs which are working on the local kind of problems, meaning they can define a problem on their own and then engage with the stakeholders within the country and then develop solutions for that. But rest of the 90% of the GCCs are the back-end supporters, right? The problems get defined somewhere else, and then they are getting integrated into that whole product cycle and developing solutions for that. I think that is what, at least I read somewhere, that what 90% of GCCs are. And collaborating with GCCs, at least my experience, I have had projects with at least 4 GCCs. For everything, they need the headquarter approvals, right? And the local decision making often doesn't happen for funding and all of that. And then some of these contract terms, they want insurance contracts and all of that, which many Indian institutions aren't even used to, right? And now those rules, to have them implemented in our institutions is also a big challenge for researchers working on a project sponsored by one of those global centers. You need to follow policies of the parent institution, the parent country, and that often becomes a big challenge in some of our institutions. These are good practices. I am not saying we should not do that, but our institutions, sometimes take time in doing all of that. And so these are the challenges. And then the IP sharing also becomes a big problem, because I think for a little bit of money, they want to own all the IP, right? Which also becomes an issue. I would like to see more GCCs, and I also know that the budgets for R&D often are very low, right? I think I know many GCCs, if you look at their annual budgets, the travel budgets are more than the R&D budgets, right? So I think, some of these are the challenges right now, and there are good institutions, and I think we need to develop that relationship. And I often say that government role is to do that matchmaking. Government wants some love marriage to happen between academia and industry, right? That is not happening, right? I think the best way...
That's a nice way of putting it, I must say.
An
love
arranged marriage,
yeah.
And then you find love, while eventually once you are married. I think government role is to, incentivize those collaborations between academia and industry, right? If they can provide co-funding, right, then I'm sure many industries would like to collaborate with academia. Once they start working with each other, I can tell you, they will be happy with each other. But then they would fund one project here, one project there, would have one bad experience, and then they generalize the whole thing, saying that nothing works in India, and then, even that little bit of funding also would be taken away. That is a problem right now. I think unless we collaborate across the scale, right, for a longer period of time, instead of making it more transactional, if we can make it more collaborative, I am sure we will eventually find love. I think that needs to happen between GCCs and Indian academic institutions. There is a lot of good talent in academic institutions, and I feel sad that it's not being utilized for any good purpose right now.
But Professor Rao, I must say, I know we can talk forever, and I know our time is up, I'm going to wrap it up. But the percentage you mentioned, 10%, seems to be pretty low. I think it's moving up. Maybe it was true several years ago, but I think the percentage of GCCs today who are truly doing very well-meaning R&D, well-meaning innovation is much higher than 10% in my opinion. But they will, as you rightly said, they will have to get an understanding of the academic institution, what they can do for, whether it is love marriage or it is arranged marriage. That's something which we need to figure it out. And I believe that there is enough love between academia and GCC. And we will certainly make sure that we take some of your... By the way, thank you for being very candid. I think what you heard from Professor Rao today is very candid. His emotions in terms of how he's been working with several of you, not just in the room in GCC, but also the service providers, the industry. But I really appreciate you sharing all your candid thoughts. And with that, let's do a wrap. And thank you very much. Let's give him a big round of applause.